Okay, let's talk to Robert from San Francisco, listening on KFAX. Hi, Robert.
Hey guys, this
Hi.
is like the first call you had somewhat. My question is basically, did I screw up or what's wrong with me?
Yes, because most of the time we do. Anyway,
If
no.
you're a
What's
guy.
what's the question? What's the
Well,
question?
and it's just dealing with disappointment. I'll try to be short.
Okay.
Feel free to whatever. Met a young lady on an airplane at the end of last year. I was like 18 years older than she. I didn't even know how much older I knew I was older. She was from the South, very conservative. We really agreed on things. At the beginning of the year, I wrote her on Facebook, said, hey, I'm like Boaz to your Ruth, but if you lived locally, I'd ask you out on a date. Like, well, would you talk to my parents? And I was like, sure.
How old is
This
she?
is all just by email. She's 26,
26. Okay, so she's like
Yeah,
a
no.
real adult.
like
We
18
hope.
years older, and
Yeah,
she'd
but-
never dated anyone.
Yeah, but 18
I
years
talked-
older, if she's 21, is one thing. She's 26 is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I talked to her parents much longer than I talked to her on the plane, and they gave me the 2+ hour conversation. And then she and I emailed a little bit, spoke on the phone a few times. The next month, her dad calls and says, "Well, when are you coming out?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know." It's like, "Well, she loves you, and we love you, and we want you to marry our daughter." I was like,
What?
"Whoa!"
Oh, wow.
And so I
Speaking of
kinda
Boaz.
like, well, Isaac didn't know Rebecca, and I said, well, I don't think that's normative of how necessarily marry. I think people should be friends first, and anyway. And so I said, could you put that in writing, so I'll remember this. And he emailed me a few hours later, and it was a completely different tone. Well, you think the distance is an issue. You think she's a nice woman, but you don't really know her, and you think you should be friends first. So therefore, I've told her she should turn her heart off towards you, and you're free now to move about the country. Bing. No, to do whatever you want, and you have no obligation.
Isn't God
And I was
good
like-
that you were able to see all that before you got too emotionally involved?
Well, I'll go a step further. So I'm thinking, So I actually thought, well, I'll talk to her. And she was like, oh, my dad said that. I didn't know that.
You think talking to her might be a good idea?
So anyway, the next month, I thought I might fly out to visit, but I was busy with work, and so she went with her mom and brother to this thing in Georgia where they teach that 80% of all disease is due to your sin. So you get Alzheimer's or cancer because of your own sin. Kind of like what I feared has come upon me. And I was telling her, I don't think that's biblical, and I think that can actually be kind of dangerous. So we talked about it more the next month, and we went into it more, and I wasn't trying to be,
Now, you still haven't seen her at this point. You guys are just talking on
correct.
the phone?
I'd
or-
not gone out to see her, and I said,
How often are you talking at this point?
maybe every week.
Every week? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so get to the point about what we could help you
All right.
with
well,
and do
so
and
here's
all that.
so I told her that if she really feels this way, I don't think that's foundationally, I think that's a dangerous thing, and I couldn't see myself marrying someone who felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
She was flying out a month and a half later. She said, well, we can talk about it then. I just kind of gave up, thinking, well, not taking it seriously. I saw her for a few days, very pleasant. We had a nice time. I enjoyed her. I wasn't, necessarily completely attracted to her. But I was like, and then for the rest of the summer, we would talk.
Okay, you got to move this down the road
All
to,
right.
to the point.
All
'cause
right.
we
Otherwise, it's
Then
going to
she
be
sends
really
me an email
frustrating
wanting
at the
to
end,
find
Robert,
out,
because
and I
we're
didn't
going to
see the
come up
email.
upon the commercial and say bye.
Yeah.
So help
So-
us here.
So what's the
Okay.
big question on all this?
Well,
I
she
think we
wound
get-
up getting engaged just a couple weeks after sending me an email that I didn't see.
Uh-huh.
And so she was in love with me, and then it's like, well, I didn't respond. So she told some guy just weeks earlier she didn't even like that she'd marry him. And I'm thinking, what have I done? I had a wonderful, young, pure, intelligent
You dodged a
woman
bullet, it sounds like to me.
No,
Without knowing more.
There's this whole there's a subculture of Christians that believe that this overprotection of a child sets them up for great success in the future. Now, to believe that, you have to believe that a parent has full knowledge and wisdom about all things. I mean, you really do, because
Oh, yeah.
you're essentially saying,
Well,
Well,
and
it's
it's
like,
even worse. Go ahead.
well, it's like she's under their authority until she marries somebody, then she's under his authority, and there's
Which
that
is-
hierarchical kinds
Correct.
of
That's what
authority
her
things.
father said.
Right.
And that doesn't go away when you get married. That's something that's deeply,
Yeah.
deeply
And
rooted.
and not only that, it's not what the Bible teaches either.
No,
I mean,
it's not
I
what the
wrote
Bible
about this actually. Big
Well,
section of Changes
I-
at Heels about this, but I just want to say it about the principle. If you go to Galatians 4, it says that when we were children, we were under guardians and managers until the date set by the father. It's called a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, where there is a recognition that adulthood is upon you.
Yeah.
Grow up and make your own
Right.
decisions, all this sort of stuff. And I understand all the cultural implications of all it. But the point is, if you infantilize adults and their parents make all their decisions for them, then they're going to be children as 40-year-olds. And so just kind of watch for that
and drive
dynamic.
you crazy.
Well,
if
and,
you
and
marry
I would-
somebody
here to
like
me
that.
is the key verse that destroys the belief in this rigid hierarchical system in marriage, and it is Ephesians 5:21. Honor Christ by submitting to each other. Now that means he has to submit to her sometimes in some certain instances, and that is different than the rigid
Well,
hierarchical
submit to
system.
each other as unto the Lord. So
Yeah,
you've got
yeah.
you've got an even stronger statement on that.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I'm aware of these things, and I agree. And I was just all of these seem kind of like red flags.
Yeah.
But now I'm looking at it, especially after she wanted to talk to me and she sent me an email, and I simply didn't see it. How then, less than 2 weeks later, she then gets engaged
So-
to some other guy.
So
What's
what's
the
the problem?
question?
What's the question?
Well, the problem is this: I'm single, and I'm thinking to myself, was I overreacting to these things? And
Okay,
is this
let me give you my perspective.
all right.
Just as I was an older single person?
Yes, you
Yeah.
were.
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
slow.
I was
You were
slow
very
I
single.
got
slow.
married in my
patient,
30s, wasn't
kinder,
like right out of
gentler.
college. So
Late
if I were in your shoes, looking back, if I were in your shoes and I were interested in someone and they with no contact other than one airplane ride and a few emails are saying that they're in love with me, then I think they got some potentially serious kinds of dependency issues. And B, if after a miscommunication they're engaged to somebody else, I'm thinking, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
I'm glad this didn't go further.
Right.
Because now I understand that there might be exceptions and there are instantaneous fallings in love that last for 60 years. But
Very rare.
that's the exception, not the rule. And if I were you, I would not be thinking I overthought and was cautious in getting into a family that thinks there aren't viruses and bacteria on the planet,
Right.
that sin causes all illness. I mean, it's just a whole system.
Yeah,
that
I
you
don't-
have a
so
lot
I
of
don't-
work to-
John chapter 9 talks about that.
My
too.
problem would be is if you think that you missed something wonderful versus you believing that that was really a very, very weird situation, and I'm glad I didn't get entangled in it.
Well, and I'd say let's get involved with somebody that's within a 50-mile radius where I can spend time with them, and I don't talk to the parents until we know each other better, and then we do that and move forward. It sounds
Well,
like
and
in
there's a
some
date-
ways.
And if you're single,
Sounds like what?
Well, it sounds like in some ways you're kind of going very cautiously, and I think distance made it seem safer to you, and it certainly
Yeah.
wasn't as safe to you.
just another diagnostic if you're single. The ideal is, if you can find somebody who's from a great family, right? But there are wonderful people who are from really
Weird
screwy
family.
families.
Yeah.
But that is probably issue number 2. Issue number 1 is if you're dating an adult who's been, they're old enough to, well, really ought to even be a young adult, you have got to be asking yourself the question as you look at them, does this person have an adult spiritual community of close friends and network people
Yeah.
that is their main spiritual family and real family right now, because that's what is healthy and that's what the Bible teaches. And if they have not developed an adult community that works for them, then they haven't left home yet, and you can't cleave before somebody is leaved.
And the wife has to leave as well, because in that cultural setting she always left. So it's not just the husband that has to leave, both have to leave.